Hey guys, in this episode, I talk a little bit about what's going on in Hong Kong, why are there still protests while we're reading headlines that the bill has been suspended, and I go into some more information about some other news in China. This is a little bit shorter today, and I'm going to run some ads actually after this intro, so get ready for that. Thanks. Hey everybody, do you want to record your own podcast like me? Well, Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now, Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now by reading this ad. That's right, mofos. It's easy. Check it out. So what is going on with Hong Kong? For anybody that's paying attention, over the last couple weeks, there's been a huge eruption of protests in Hong Kong. Millions of people have been demonstrating in Hong Kong over an extradition bill. The reason this is important is because it effectively starts bringing Chinese mainland law to Hong Kong. So people that aren't familiar with the situation, Hong Kong has a separate legal system than mainland China. And what's going on is that there's a bill that's trying to be passed through the Hong Kong legislature, which would allow people in Hong Kong to be subject to extradition to China for breaking certain crimes based on Chinese mainland law. And it's supposed to be, it's supposed to have very strict criteria attached to it, but it's essentially a step in applying Chinese law to Hong Kong. And people realize that this is a big problem, and they are protesting like their lives depend on it. And they probably do, to be honest. So they've been having massive protests. They've been shutting down the city. Now, what's going on now? I've been hearing headlines that it's been withdrawn, the bill's been withdrawn. I've heard about a public apology. So let's dig in a little bit. What the shit is going on? So here is an article from the South China Morning Post. It's actually pretty decent. It says Carrie Lam should withdraw extradition bill and make full public apology, says former Hong Kong minister. This is an ex-transportation chief, Anthony Chung, suggests Hong Kong leader deliver apology in person and calls on her to appoint a judge to investigate police. But he says that crisis that grips the city goes beyond chief executive's handling of the controversial extradition bill. So basically what's going on here is that Chung says that the crisis underscores the complete failure of our political system. The central government can no longer expect the problems in Hong Kong to be resolved by focusing on economic and livelihood issues while avoiding political reform. So basically he's saying is, it's pretty obvious. Hong Kong has done very well financially and economically, and because of that, there's kind of been an expectation that they'd be able to get some of this legislation passed as long as the people are happy. Because in mainland China, I think that's kind of the feel, is mainland China has seen such an increase in their standard of living that they, people might wonder how they tolerate the censorship and things like that in mainland China. Well, that's probably one reason why, because the people remember what it was like 30 years ago. So they continue, they say Hong Kong is in a very grave situation now, probably even worse than the crisis situation after July 1st, 2003, which forced the federal government to withdraw the national security legislation. Not familiar with that. So they have bigger protests that are fueled. This thing is not over yet. There was an official apology that was announced by the leader, but what's going on here? Why are people still trying to protest? What I read in this article was that the extradition bill, the process to pass the bill has been suspended, but the bill itself has not been withdrawn. So I'm not familiar with Chinese law or with Hong Kong law and Hong Kong procedure, but I was very confused because I kept reading that the bill was suspended, and then I kept reading about protests. So I'm like, what's going on here? I guess that the bill has not been formally withdrawn as of yet, but it has been, the process of passing the bill has been suspended. So it's not going to be passed right now. And the people are not satisfied with that, so they continue to protest. So that's what's going on with the Hong Kong situation. Let's see what else is going on the Chinese front today. See if there's anything going on with trade, economic policy. I've got some interesting perspective from some people that I speak with in China. Their perspective has been pretty much that Hong Kong, the people of Hong Kong should do whatever they want. I haven't heard any, and they could have just been saying that for who knows what, but the sentiment I got from some of my Chinese friends in China was that they don't, if Hong Kong doesn't want this legislation, then Hong Kong shouldn't have the legislation. So let's see here. What else is going on in the world today with China? The People's Bank of China, markets to play a more decisive role in exchange rate. China will let markets play a more prominent role in deciding the exchange rate for its yuan currency, the central bank's vice governor said. We will improve the market based on exchange rate information and transmission mechanism. We aim to let the market play a more decisive role in determining the exchange rate. I'm not sure how accurate that is because they have a two-currency system. Here's something. China's Xi has phone call with Trump, according to Chinese state media. China's President Xi Jinping held a phone call with his U.S. counterpart Donald Trump. Chinese state media said on Tuesday, coming at a time when the two biggest economies are embroiled in disputes over issues such as trade and security. China's state television CCTV said the two leaders had a phone call but did not give any details. Earlier on Tuesday, Trump said he would meet with Xi at the G20 summit this month, and that trade talks between the two countries were set to restart ahead of that time. So it does look like that. I've read a couple of articles that do indicate that China and the U.S. are probably going to resume talks pretty soon. So keep in mind this is June 19th, and I guess they're going to have a G20 meeting soon. I have been hearing a lot about how the Chinese economy is fairly weak right now. And so considering all the pressure on Huawei and the pressure on possibly on their rare earth minerals, it would probably be a good idea for them to cooperate with Trump. That being said, here's my perspective is I've said before, this is a tricky situation with the Chinese. Since we're their biggest buyer in certain respects, they do have to maintain the government has to maintain legitimacy over in mainland China. So they do need to have economic growth. They can't just forego all of their economic growth in hopes that national pride will take over, because people do need to feed their families. And they don't want to risk their government being overthrown. So I do see it very possible, if they are squeezed tight enough, that they would come to the table and make some concessions. I could definitely see that. But we don't know. We don't know for sure what's going to happen, but that's how it looks. With regards to Huawei and the rare earth minerals, basically still, people are trying to figure out what's going to happen with Huawei. Are they going to be able to access U.S. parts from U.S. companies? With the rare earth minerals, I've been reading that we've been working with maybe Australia and other places in the U.S. to start up mines to get production flowing from other sources other than China. So these are not good for China. And, they know that, I'm sure. And so to me, it makes sense that a deal is probably going to be made. But the other thing is you got to remember that the Chinese do have they take a long-term stance, generally speaking. President Xi over there, Chairman Xi, he is going to be in power for who God knows how long. They abolished their term limits for their president a couple years back. So the president of China could stay in power for conceivably as long as he wants to now. And if they get onto a long-term footing, if they can keep their economy running to get past the Trump presidency, I think that they will. But if they are worried about a financial or economic collapse, then I think they'll work with him. And I do think they are a little bit worried. I've been reading a lot of rumblings about the Chinese financial system. It seems a little bit fragile. So, but the whole world seems like that right now. I could be wrong, but to me, the whole world seems like we're in a bit of a game here about it's a balancing act where people were trying to pursue growth, but at the same time, debt levels are high, which means it kind of shows that income levels aren't doing so well. It's a big mess, and so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Anyway, that's my update on China for today. I apologize if it's a little weak, but that's all I got. So enjoy the day. Thank you.